Hey, Chef Todd Moore here. I was about to call my mom. You should do the same. Call her. Or are you going to see her on Mother's Day or see her during a holiday Easter brunch? That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go cook Mother's Day brunch with my mom. What a great gift. One of the things that I love to do during Mother's Day brunch is crepes, because you can put everything from scrambled eggs to ice cream and strawberries in them. And here's a classic episode of making crepes in the commercial kitchen.
We're going to do something really simple today, which is crepes. Crepes are simple, but yet they perplex so many people. I have more people asking me if I have a crepe maker or where they can buy a good crepe maker. I say, I don't have a crepe maker, but my wife has a crepe maker. Name Chef Todd Moore. What do you need a specific device to make crepes for? You need a pan and you need some basic batter. This is one of the few instances that I recommend Teflon pans. I've got a nice 7-inch omelet pan here lined with Teflon. It makes things a lot easier to do with our crepes when we have Teflon. One of the few times, because we're not rendering any fat. We're not trying to get any fond on the bottom of the pan. We're not trying to release that fond to make a pan sauce. We're just trying to make some crepes. I learned this cool pan flipping thing. Anyway, so we're going to make some crepes today. It's a very simple procedure. This is a close cousin to the pancake. It's a close cousin to pâte à choux. It's a close cousin to popovers that we've done before, and it's very, very simple, but the procedure, like so many things, is the most important. So over here, my ingredients. Actually, the first thing I'm going to do is get a fire under the pan. Having the pan hot is the most important aspect of making crepes. Having a hot pan, like when you make pancakes, you know the first pancake never comes out right, and they have a phrase in French culinary, it goes something like the first crepe pour les chiens, which means the first crepe is for the dog. It never comes out right. Hot pan is the most important thing, and what I have are my ingredients over here. I have 4 ounces of flour by weight on my spring scale. I've also got a ½ ounce of sugar that I've put in here. I've got 2 whole eggs that I'm going to use. I'm going to use a little pinch of salt, 1/8 of a teaspoon for those of you that have to measure. I have 8 ounces of milk. Can be whole milk, can be skim milk, can be anything that you want. And lastly, 2 ounces of melted butter. Now again, put 2 chefs in a room and you'll get 5 opinions, but this is my way to make crepes. I've got my 4 ounces of flour and a ½ ounce of sugar that I'm going to go ahead and add into the bowl, all my dry ingredients. A pinch of salt will open our palate a little bit, and then we're going to go ahead and crack the eggs into there. 1, 2, and make a paste from the eggs and the flour. Using my whisk, go ahead and start stirring that around, and as best I can, make a paste from the flour and eggs. And see how that starts to look a little sticky. This hardly looks like it's going to be a crepe, so let's add a little bit of the milk to loosen that up. My paste starts to turn into pancake batter, but this is still a little too thick for crepes, so what I wanted to do is look like pretty thin wallpaper paste. So I'll go ahead and add the rest of my milk in there, and then add the milk to it. Lastly, our melted butter goes in here, and we'll whisk in the melted butter. Now that I've got my batter made up, I want to let this sit and rest for a few minutes, hopefully in the refrigerator, because again, gelatinization of starches. I want that flour to absorb as much of this liquid as I can, giving me a much stiffer crepe. In the meantime, our pan on the stove, which we've heated up, we want to make sure that this is a very hot pan. How do we do that? Lick our finger, and no, of course not. We have a little cup of water up here, and I'll take a little bit of water on my fingers. Put that in the pan. You see that immediate evaporation of moisture? Let's go ahead and add 1 ounce of the crepe batter exactly by my scoop. Pick the pan up and roll that around. It's almost like making an omelet at this point, but with an omelet we're going to start to pull in from the sides, which will give us a fluffier omelet. We don't want to do that with crepes. We want a nice flat crepe, and if you'll notice how wet the crepe still is. We don't want this to be wet, we want it to be dry throughout. So I'm going to continue to cook it on this first side till I see the top of the crepe is almost entirely dry. Then it's going to be time to flip the crepe. Well, again, we can do this in the fancy chef manner, flip it up in the air. What I find easier for people is to get a spatula up under the edge of the crepe, pull it toward the end of the pan there, and simply fold it over that way. You might have to get your hands in there and flatten it back out like I did. Hands are your best tool. There's our first crepe. And since it was cooked almost entirely on the first side till it was dry, when I flip it over, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's done. It's less than 5 seconds. And what I've got here is some parchment paper. Just turn the pan over and lay that crepe out on the parchment paper. Keep it nice and flat. Set the pan back on the stove to recover some of the heat, and we'll do another one. Now once my pan has recovered some heat and I've got some butter in there, let's go back with another 1 ounce ladle of my crepe batter. Exactly 1 ounce, so all my crepes are the same size. Don't be guessing at it because you'll have thicker crepes and thinner crepes. I'm going to swirl the pan around to cover the entire bottom of the pan, and look that it's still wet. The crepe batter is still running, and what I want to do is cook this until it's dry on top. Cooking it basically all the way through from the bottom till I see my crepes start to turn dry. And now I see that it's not running anymore, and I can do one of two things to flip my crepe. The easiest way for most people is to get this spatula up under the edge of the crepe like this, pull it toward the end of the pan, and simply fold it over to cook the other side. And because it was cooked almost all the way through, it's 2, 3, 4, 5, and it's done. Or if you want to be fancy chef type, well, you can roll the crepe down to the edge of the sloped side of the pan, up and back, and flip it over that way, and our crepe is done. And my next crepe off the pan, I've got some parchment paper here. Just turn the pan right over, and sometimes you got to get your hands in here and flatten it out a little bit. And I've got these 2 nice crepes that I went ahead and made. Why do I put them on parchment paper? Well, if I'm going to use them immediately, that really isn't necessary. But I'll show you a cool trick. If you make a whole bunch of crepes, lay them on parchment paper like this. Now what I do is roll the parchment paper up with the crepes in it, and now I can go ahead and freeze this. And then at some later date when I need crepes, I'll go ahead and unroll it. And there's my 2 crepes ready to use. It's an easy way to keep them from sticking together, parchment paper, and roll it up. So once you've learned how to make crepes, what can you make with crepes? Oh yeah, you can make everything and anything. Every culture in the world has something that they stuff something else into. If it's empanadas, if it's samosas in India, if it's crepes in France, every culture has something that you can stuff in here. So what can you stuff in here? Well, ice cream. Dessert crepes are wonderful. Chocolate, vanilla ice cream, chocolate syrup on top, fantastic. Let's go to the other end of the day. Breakfast, scrambled eggs with some brie and dill rolled into a crepe, maybe a white sauce on top of that. How about lunch? How about turkey and bacon in a crepe with some compound mayonnaise, a red pepper mayonnaise or something on top? That's lunch. How about dinner? Sauteed chicken, goat cheese, mushrooms stuffed in a crepe. It's absolutely endless. You don't need a crepe maker. You need to become a crepe maker. You don't need a specific appliance. You need the basic procedure.